starting to. Why wouldn't they be building up? We are now live. We're live on Facebook, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, guys and girls across Australia and New Zealand. We have a great session this afternoon that's going to go for around 30 minutes. It is called Tech Tuesday. And on Tech Tuesday, what we do is we unpack what the best real estate companies in Australia are doing with tech, in particularly the tech subscriptions they've got. Are they helping them to get more listings, more sales, become more efficient? Or, Phil, and you'd see this, there's a heap of companies in Australia that pay all the tech subscriptions. They buy them all, but, you know, the optimization and the usage of them, Phil, is not so high. But, Phil, mate, this has to be the longest time we have not we haven't spoke like we normally tic-tac by phone and SMS. We did speak yesterday. Good to see you, Phil. You're looking healthy. Life is good in Adelaide?
No, life is good, Tom. Yeah, I kind of agree. It's kind of, life goes by pretty fast. But in saying that, Tom, I think we've had our third child in that time frame. So sorry that I haven't spoken, but probably that's been occupying a fair bit of my time with the third child who's just been come along over the last few months. So I've been pretty busy, but no, life is good down here, Tom. I can't complain at all. Can't complain.
I just finished a conversation today with another prominent real estate operator, David Highland.
Oh, yeah?
There's another one coming for him. And if it hasn't come, it's coming like anytime soon. And I think yours is number 3. I think his is number 4.
Is that right? I haven't spoken to David for a little while either, so I'll have to reach out. But yeah, he'd be a busy boy. He's a busy man at the best of times, David.
Yes. So, firstly, I'm really happy for you, Phil, because for decades there was this Sydney and Melbourne market, and then Queensland to a less extent, but it was always Sydney, Melbourne, go up 10% each year, get listings, days on market are low. And then there was Adelaide, and I used to come over to these Adelaide advertiser trips when I was employed as an employee of News Corp, and I'd come to Adelaide, and there it was, slow and steady Adelaide, and bang, COVID hits, goes crazy. And then it doesn't stop. The rest of Australia stopped, except for Perth. Adelaide kept going, and I kept thinking, anytime soon. But it's just gone and gone. It's been good, hasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite incredible. I mean, over the couple of years of COVID, we're having, you know, certain suburbs anywhere in 25, 30, 35, 40%, you know, annualized growth, which is quite extraordinary. And to put some context around that for people, you've got to remember that the decade leading up to COVID, we'd had 1.7% growth per year for 10 years in a row. And then we hit COVID and then we had 25, 30% growth. So you're talking a normalized market of 1.7%, which is actually tracking below CPI. So from a growth perspective, it was totally just not there at all. So yeah, it's been a phenomenal ride.
So Phil, if there's anyone watching or listening this and they bought a home in the 2000s in Adelaide and sold it in 2019, they wouldn't be happy today, would they, Phil?
Yeah, or if you didn't buy, you know, there's, sadly, there's stories of people like negotiating, you know, missing out on a property for $995 at auction and trying to save that 5 or 10 grand, and then 12 months later it's worth 1.3, you know. But certain segments of the market, like that's catastrophic, Tom. Like, you know, and not everything's 25. Some of those markets are higher than that, depending on where it was. Like, you could be in a marketplace where a home was worth 600,000, then 18 months later it's worth close to $1 million. So certain people on those income levels, they're just not going to save that money to get into that. They're having to change areas of where they're going to look. So it's been a challenging market, that's for sure.
Hey, Harris, big business, both in sales and rent roll. You got a big rent roll. How many properties you got there, Philly?
Currently managing about 3,500.
And sales as a company?
We'll do, like at the peak of COVID, we did just over 2,500. Year after COVID came back slightly, but I think this financial year we'll be back at about 2,500. So our actual numbers now in terms of volume, we've had some kind of recruitment and acquisitions come along with that, but we're probably back at about 2,500 sales a year.
Okay. When did you set up Harris? When did you set up?
We started 2010.
Okay, so we're on 13 years now. And for how many? You've been the main shareholder for the whole 13 years, haven't you, Phil?
I have. It's just myself and Tom Hector. So we're the two shareholders.
Okay.
But in saying that, Tom, the structure of our business now, so Tom and myself own the whole of Harris Real Estate, and we've now got two other partners in outer offices where Harris Corporate is a 50-50 partner in a couple of other offices. We've got 5 offices in total. So there's 3 that are completely 100% company owned, and there's a couple others where we've got 50-50 JVs in.
And Phil, are you CEO? Is that what your role is in the company?
No, but I operate under the title of Managing Director. So we have our org structure. We have a GM who sits over the whole of the business. We have a head of sales and we have a head of property management. My role is MD. So I'm, obviously with, over a couple of hundred staff. We're an independent, not a franchise. So at a business of that size, there is a lot of corporate activity that needs to be done. Negotiating with suppliers and structure and properties and leases and all of those sort of things. That's not my space. That's not my passion or my skill set. So a GM handles those things. I'm still very much about innovation, training salespeople, and growth strategy.
Okay. Can I ask, Phil, do you go to listing presentations at all?
Yeah, I still do occasionally. Not nowhere near as many as what I do, but if a sales guy wants me to come along, I'll definitely jump in the lounge room, do what I can do to help guys list stock.
You call auctions?
Yeah, so I'm doing not a heap. I'm probably doing somewhere between 20 and 30 a month.
Okay. Now, would you consider Harris to be a company that has embraced the real estate technology, softwares, applications? Would you say that you're an early adopter? Where do you see yourself?
It's hard because I kind of don't really compare with other companies. I'd say that, we are absolutely very, very pro-tech. I would say my philosophy around tech is, my philosophy on tech has probably changed a little bit over the last 3 to 5 years than what it was 3 to 5 years ago. I was probably before Tom. I was very much a believer that I would want to be the absolute early adopter, to be the first at it. I've definitely shifted my mindset around being first to market with tech. I'm probably more suited to now. I don't need to be first to market. I'm happy for some of those bumps and some of those things to be ironed out before Harris adopts. So we're probably a lot more selective and cautious before we jump, but we are a very strong adopter of technology, but not tech for the sake of tech. At the end of the day, we want things that enable agents and property managers to either do more volume or to do it easier. And if the tech solution can't answer that, then I'm not interested in it.
Okay, so AgentBox is your CRM system?
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of the other tech stacks that you've got?
I think if I start with sales, the main tech stack that our guys plug into, so CRM is where it starts with AgentBox. That plugs to Realtor, so that's the next part of that. And the other component for workflow management, I would say, is Airtable. So yeah, there's a whole heap of other tech that, some of the stuff that we've got. But I think my philosophy around tech that I've seen is that it seems though the industry is fascinated with kind of going horizontal along tech, which is very lightly integrated around too much tech versus going deep into actually getting the most out of those product lines. So until you've really got your CRM, Realtor, and your Airtable, your actual workflow, unless you've really got those embedded in, I kind of wouldn't be worried about too much other tech until you've got those actually dialed in.
Okay. So, by the way, everyone, I'm letting you know Tech Tuesday is actually brought to you by Realtor, and you use elements of Realtor. Phil, can I ask you, what do you use with Realtor? I mean, are you an agency? Do you do digital pre-list kits? By the way, thank you, Susan, in the chat box has put in the link to Realtor. There's a bunch of free resources and the opportunity to learn more about Realtor. We are interviewing Phil Harris, arguably one of the best businesses in all of Australia and New Zealand, all out of what used to be sleepy Adelaide, not sleepy now. Want to ask you, Phil, what do you use Realtor for?
Well, I think the main fundamentals that we're using Realtor is that if you're kind of tuning in, you're starting to think about what does my workflow need to look like. There's other things that you can do in Realtor, but the major component that I would say you've got to get right, you've got to fix the solution of going, first and foremost, you meet somebody at an open home and you take their details on your mobile or iPad, right? Either through Agent Box or various other application. So there's a digital input into your CRM that needs to feed through to a digital marketing tool. So a CRM. So we use that functionality of Realtor. That needs to automatically produce out of your CRM a pre-list kit through to Tom Panos if I'm going out to appraise your home. Now I've appraised your home and I update the data. That's now got to automatically populate to a selling proposal. Now I update the proposal, and once it's updated the proposal, we need that to feed directly through to a sales agency agreement. And so that section of meeting somebody at an open home to actually having a signed authority, that all needs to be in that one workflow. So I'd say that's the first major kind of piece of the puzzle that you need to solve within your tech stack in terms of workflow.
Do you have people in your business that help you execute and put in place tech processes, or who does that? Is that something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really valid question. So I think for me, like in terms of the future of the industry, I don't think everybody has the same access and the same availability of all of the tech stack that is available. But the major difference, I think, between our organization, a lot of other organizations, is that if you haven't got the resources to actually roll out, train, onboard, and coach, and it's a gradual process, you can have the tech, but you're actually not using it. So we would have someone like Deanna in our organization, like almost for a while there, like 50 to 70% of her job was purely based around training and onboarding agents on how to use Realtor effectively, right? So and that's just one tech. We have other people who are focused on Agent Box. We have other people who are coaches on Airtable, other coaches who are coaching on Reader, all of those certain different things. So I think that to me is, it's not about the actual tech itself anymore. It's actually about one's ability to actually maximize the product. And that there's a major difference between office to office in terms of everybody says, oh yeah, I've got Agent Box, or I've got Realtor, or I've got whatever, but how effectively are you actually using the product? I think that's the key.
So I'm curious, Phil, on your view, the proposals that go out to clients. So you've listed a property. No, you haven't listed the property. You've done a listing presentation and you give them a proposal.
Yeah.
Do you put fees on all your proposals? What fee you're charging? You put all the marketing in there, right?
Jim, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the whole sales team, but our direction at management is the full disclosure around marketing fees, price, all those things.
All right. Do you feel like 2023 consumerism means that there are some agents that turn around and say, oh, the problem that with putting a commission on a proposal is that when the emotion has left the listing presentation and an owner's got 3 or 4 presentations, do you think that it can cost you business if you haven't been the cheapest? Or do you think that we're in an environment now where the average consumer actually feels the relationship and how the presentation went and can justify, oh, well, they were better, so that's the fee? So I suppose what I'm saying is you're more than comfortable to have fee on proposals and then say, pick the best one. Yeah.
Yeah, not only comfortable, I think you should. You talk about consumerism. I think you're talking about agentism. I think that's more in the agent's head than what it is in the consumer. You got to think about the consumer you're dealing with. Like if somebody's selling a house, typically speaking, and most of the marketplaces that probably the people who are tuning into this call, Tom, like you're dealing with a pretty sophisticated consumer, really. If you've got a house, clearly you've been able to get a mortgage, and to be able to get a mortgage, you've obviously got a job, and your partner's probably got a job as well. So you're a relatively educated person that you're actually dealing with. So I think that agents get too caught up in the in the fee, and if I disclose it, what if I do, what if I don't? I think that the best way of explaining it to me, when agents put all this emphasis on the back end, which it was my fees or marketing as to why I did or did not lose it, and some of the time that may actually be the case, but I kind of describe, a listing presentation to me is like a kind of 15-round heavyweight boxing match. You don't have to win every round, but at the end of the 15 rounds, you need a higher points count than what your competitor does. So like when they first ring you for an appraisal, Tom, and like the way you take that telephone call, like I don't necessarily have to be better than my competition on the phone, but I've got to at least be parallel, equal. Hopefully I was a little bit better on the phone. When the pre-list kit, when I hung up the phone and the pre-list kit turned up and I got a calendar invite and something got dropped off to my house and I immediately got SMS a contact card, if I'm like marginally better than my competition. And if you think about that entire process, Johnny McGrath used to talk about 30, 40, 30 with a listing presentation. You've just got to think about the fact that you won't win every single stage of that listing process. But if you can be marginally better the whole way through, Tom, I don't think that you will necessarily get the fee or the marketing that you want, but I think that you're there to have the conversation at the end. If there's a slight tendency to want to go with you, then I think, the door is going to be open to have that conversation. But the easy option is to say, I just didn't get it. They rang me back. They rang me back and said, I haven't got it. I think the easy option is to say it was just the fee. But the reality is the total point score at the end of that 15-round analogy is you are probably kind of on the back foot anyway, if you didn't get back in the door for a conversation about it at least. And I think about myself logically, if I want to use someone and the fees aren't quite right, depending on how you position it, I think it's unlikely that a vendor wouldn't at least have a conversation with you about that,
Okay, well said, well said. By the way, those that are joining in now, I'm letting you know, this is Tech Tuesday, brought to you by Realtair, and our panelist today is Phil Harris, who is the Managing Director of Harris in South Australia, one of the biggest businesses in Australia and New Zealand, both sales and rent roll. And we're going through the tech stack he's spoken about today, Agent Box, Reader. He, of course, is a user of Realtair, otherwise he wouldn't be on here today. That stands to reason. But you also brought up Airtable. Airtable. So I'm getting people asking me, what's Airtable?
The best way to describe Airtable is probably Excel on steroids. That's probably the best description of it. There traditionally, Tom, there's, as well as I do, there's this black hole that sits between I've listed a property and I've got my authority in my hand, and then launching a property online. There's that black hole space of, the 150 tasks that need to be completed to get a property online, to launch a property, like, get a spare set of keys cut, order floor plan, order brochure, like all of the workflow that's attached. And so where that Airtable product sits is that kind of middleware, Tom, where it's able to provide the workflow where the agents are doing if there's 150 tasks to launch a property, right? The agent might be responsible for 10 of those. Their PA might be responsible for 47 of those 150. And then the office might be taking care of the other 111 tasks. And of those 111 tasks that the office are doing, Tom, 97 of those might be done offshore in the Philippines. So effectively, that's the one hymn sheet where everybody's working out of for workflow. That's probably the best description.
Okay, I got it. And it's, do you reckon that is your business, would you call it very process driven?
Yeah. Certain segments. I think that, we try to build an environment where where it's very process driven around the tangible things. And then we try to provide an environment for creativity and personality where that's what the salesperson brings to the table in the way that they present, the way that they interact with buyers, the way that they build their personal brand. I think there's a lot more fluidity and choice in that. But in terms of how you process something, I think that I do believe in the McDonald's system of processing workflow.
Okay. So, Phil, another question I want to ask you is, in every business, I always meet salespeople that they're seen as being a bit of a side, like they're in a team, they're in a big office, they're successful, but they sort of do their own thing. They'll, instead of the CRM system, they'll have a Excel spreadsheet, which is their chase list, right? They'll have they'll manually get their phone and be sending text messages out to clients that they're chasing, right? They just do, this is who I am, Tom, this is how I do it, right? So there's always this challenge of, how do we get all our team sort of, being compliant and maximizing the systems that we use? Is there any tips or suggestions you can give from a leadership perspective? How do you get, particularly with you, because you've got such a big business, how many people work in the sales department there, Phil?
I think there's close to 100 in the sales team. So it's about 220 across the business in total, but I think about 100 maybe actively selling out of that. Yeah.
So Phil, just picture, if you've got this small little office where you're a selling principal with 2-3 sales people, and the principal's there with them all the time. No, mate, fucking put it in this, shouldn't swear, put it in the CRM system, put it in there, this and that. You're herding cats. You're herding cats. How do you actually do that to get people, to use the systems?
Well, I think first and foremost is like, I mean, you said it well. You got some guy sitting in the corner on Excel. This guy's kind of, downloaded his own version of Agent Box. This person's kind of, putting emojis in their phone, running their database that way, or whatever it might be. I think largely though, Tom, and I was one of those agents as well in the previous companies that I worked at before I founded Harris. And I think that largely exists in an environment where the principal isn't committed to excellence. If the principal's not committed to innovation, excellence, and providing best in market product for people to tap into, there's going to be people who are going to say, well, I'm going to have to find a way, right? So I think it starts at the core of the DNA of the founder, or whoever the principal is, the person who's actually driving it. So, one of our brand promises as an organization to our internal staff is to provide a platform of operational excellence. So my goal every day when I come to work is, my challenge is say, how do I provide a platform which is absolutely best in market for our staff to plug into? So it's not, without saying it, you don't have to use our data. Well, you do have to use our database. I can't say you don't, but it wouldn't make sense not to, because I'm continually innovating that. I'm not getting you to use Realtor for a pre-list kit for a proposal to get it to flow through to agency agreement because I'm trying to be a pain. I'm actually doing it to make life easier for you, So if you're a principal and you want everybody to be singing off of the one hymn sheet, well, you've got to have the right hymn sheet in place and be able to play by that. And if you can't provide that, that's when people go looking elsewhere for different product lines. As I said, you want your staff to be creative and fluid and, those sort of things in the right areas. You don't want your staff having to try and be creative about how to process a listing, how to do a proposal, or how to launch a property online. That's not where creativity is required,
Okay. Phil, we heard of IQ, EQ. Work Q is your ability to process large amounts of work in various busy times. You hear of TQ, your technology quotient. What do you think, Phil? Do you think a young person coming into real estate now, out of those 4 things, that's a good question. Out of those 4 things, Work Q, which is your work ethic, EQ, your ability to read the play and read human behavior and the psychology that drives people, TQ, your ability to adapt to tech things that you're given to do, and an IQ, your cognition. What do you reckon out of all the 4? What do you reckon is the most important in real estate?
Well, I think, first and foremost, IQ, I think that there's a certain benchmark that's required. And then once you've hit that level, the upside, there's no upside in being super uber smart, right? So if you're a relatively, you can't be a dipstick, Tom, right? So there's a certain level of
you got to be able to pick up the right keys for the right house, or otherwise there's a problem there.
Yeah. So I think there's a minimum entry point, but then all of the upside on top of that doesn't get you the same quota of upside in it, right? So in terms of order, I think maybe it's neck and neck for work ethic and EQ. I think I think you can be a highly successful agent if you've got high work ethic and like really strong emotional skills. You actually just get along well with people and you can read the play. You know, like if you can actually read the play with people with a very minimal tech stack, like I know for sure, Tom, I could still do, like if you give me very minimal tech, like clearly if you give me a MacBook and my CRM and my iPhone without all of the other bells and whistles through just, you know, there's a minimal amount of tech that I'll need. I'll need a CRM and my MacBook to operate and my phone, but like work ethic and EQ, I think they're the top two. And then depending on your nature, like the tech can actually get in the way for some people.
I agree with you.
You know, like it can. But if you've got the work ethic and you've got the EQ, then what happens if you add tech on top of that, that I can say does become a unfair advantage if you're not good at tech. So if your work ethic plus EQ plus tech equals far bigger than just work ethic, EQ, and no tech. So like the tech on top, if you've got those first two, can become a massive multiplier. And that's what we've seen with our best salespeople.
Yeah, Matty LaHood from the agency said to me, one of the things that he's noticed with Realtair and other tech is the ability of an agent that ticks the other boxes to be able to replace an admin-based support person with an income-producing support person, be it a lead generator or working buyers, if the office has got a reasonable level of tech support and admin support, that you don't have to go off and spend 75 grand on an admin person, because if you're an agent that understands how to send out a digital introduction or digital price updates to your CRM system, if you're able to get contracts, you know, signed, and you get, most of your contracts are signed on glass now, I presume, would they?
Yeah, still a bit of both, but yeah, I think primarily glass. Yeah.
Do you think with tech, if used right, you can have less admin support?
Yeah, 100. That's one of the biggest shifts I've seen probably in the last 7 years, Tom. So like before, back when I was coming through, starting out as a real estate agent, going back 20 odd years ago, like the first if you wanted to grow, the first person you would put on would be an admin based support staff member. Whereas now inside our office environment, the administrator comes as the second employee, not as the first anymore. So our office largely takes care of the vast majority of all of that admin process. So when our agents are, you know, maybe they're writing somewhere between 400 and 600 grand by themselves, and they're wanting to put on their first employee, we're now employing what we call a co-agent, not an administrator, into our teams. And then if they're writing 400 to 600, they'll put on a co-agent. The team will grow to about 800K and above in fees. And the second hire now becomes a team manager because of the volume that they are doing. There's now a certain amount of admin for, you know, there's a certain amount of settlements and a certain amount of pre-inspections, and there's building inspections, and there's like the volume now requires more of an administrative-based role.
Well said. Well said. By the way, everyone that's watching in here, if you aren't a Realtair client and you're thinking new year, new me, new practices, new philosophy, just go to the chat box. We actually have got a URL that you can actually look at to explore Realtair further. Finally, Phil, I'm fascinated. You've been now, I would probably say, would you say, is this your third decade in real estate?
Yeah, I'm into my third.
How long have you been in? 25 years?
Just under, about 23, I think. Yeah.
When did you want to become a real estate agent? At what age were you when you thought, I want to do real estate?
When I'd bottomed out on everything else in my life, Tom. And
did you go to year 12?
Pardon, sorry?
Did you finish high school? Did you go to year 12?
No, I scraped through year 11, and then yeah, it was interesting. Well, I was in year 11. My best mate at the time was, you know, the guys in this call are probably too young to know, but my best mate in Adelaide, guy called Leighton Hewitt, he ended up #1 tennis player in the world. But he hit stardom at 16, so I went traveling around the world with him. I left school. Leighton said, I'm traveling around the world. Do you want to come? And I said, I'm out of here, Mum and Dad. I'm gone. So I traveled around the world with him.
Wowee. There's something that some people may not have known. Mate, Phil Harris, Leighton Hewitt, they could have been there at Wimbledon, doubles partners, right? But what happened is Leighton
I was no good. That's why I'm here having a chat with you, mate.
Hey, listen, Phil, have you heard of a sport called pickleball?
Yeah, it's going bananas in the US. It's here now, but yeah, it's blown up in the US. It's huge.
I've just seen courts left, right, and centre now in Australia. Everyone's getting these lines drawn up on tennis courts, and people are just lining up left, right, and centre with these paddles and these plastic balls. It's going crazy, Phil.
Yeah, it's big business. I think it's great as well. I think that kind of, particularly as people get older, tennis is a bit harder to play. Whereas I think kind of almost like table tennis, where pickleball brings it all in smaller. So like anyone, like you can play at a far older age. So there's hope for you, Tommy. Get out there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm excited. I had a bet with some guy at a seminar. I get people to do push-ups. This guy goes, mate, I won't do push-ups, but I'll challenge you to a game of pickleball. He had a packet of Winfield Blue in his top pocket. He's about 150 kilos. And I put my hand out. I said, any day, mate. I shook my hand. I've done a stupid bet. And now I've got to play the guy on December 15. I then YouTube pickleball, and I worked out you can be overweight, smoke, and still win a game of pickleball. That's a
No, it's a great. I haven't played yet, but looks like fun. I might have to get into it.
Now, Phil, last thing is, there's a lot of people that see you as the messiah of real estate. They see you as a guy that got into real estate young. He's built an incredible company, and you've got a lot of young people that have got aspirations for whatever reason. They just didn't go to uni. Life hasn't worked out. They've ended up in real estate, and they see this as the vehicle to freedom, right? Yet the truth is, and I've been reading some data, pretty much 90% of the revenue in real estate across Australia and New Zealand, probably 85, is written by around 15% of the age. It's so heavily populated by a small group of people, right? What is it that this small group of people have in common that devastates the other 85%? Why?
Well, I think, Tom, I don't think it's overly complicated. I think it comes back to what we spoke about before. Like I regularly talk to, if I'm talking to somebody who wants a, successful career in real estate, I think it comes down to two things. I think number one is volume. So if you call that work ethic, what we spoke about before, over my 23-year journey, there's a lot of stuff that just hasn't changed, Tom. I would say there's a lot more distractions that have gotten in the way now. But at the end of the day, no matter how you skin it, there is a certain level of prospecting activity that needs to be done on a daily basis. And you can't, you can't fake it. You can't post it on Insta. You can't put a story up. You cannot fake it. You've either done that prospecting work like every single day. By midday, you've got to pay the rent. And people don't want to hear this, but you got to pay the rent, and the rent is paid by basically 20 to 30 connecting calls pre-midday every single day, like 5 days a week. That's the rent, and you got to pay it. And as I said, it's not sexy. You can't really post it. It's not going to get your likes, but that's what but that's what those guys do. So there's a level of volume there that is required. And then the second part to that, it's volume and it's skills. And this is the other part. It's not sexy anymore. I remember, Tom, you remember, you'd be the same. But when I first started in real estate, we used to sit in a room for at least 1 hour per week, and we'd sit there and we'd sweat and we'd do role play. Role play your listing presentation, role play your open home buyer callback, role play your negotiation. Some of the younger guys these days sit down and want to do a role play people, need to bring a support person along or have a day off or have a stress day. It's you need to get skills. So for me, it's it's volume and it's skill. So if you're doing the required work ethic and you've got some really sound skills around how to actually list a property, and you've got really great phone manner, and then also, which is kind of counterintuitive to society today, but if you're doing good volume and you've got good skills, we've got to learn to play the long game, which is the opposite of what we see in social. Social is about results, and we've got it now, and all now. The best agents are continually just sowing seeds for the future, which is I meet somebody today who says, I'm selling a home in 5 years. Don't be disappointed by that. Great agents get excited by that. Awesome, I've got a listing in 5 years' time. Now I just got to go and find another one. So if you're doing volume and you've got skills and you're playing the long term, which is my mindset is you know, I'm going to be in real estate in 20, 30 years time. But if you're prospecting, if you're still not sure whether you're going to be in real estate next year, then you haven't got a long mind mentality. It's really, really hard to do well. So that's the basics of it.
Team, listen to what he just said. I'd watch it over again, because there's a lot of people here that are watching a few people on social media that rent cars for a day, have the no sock look. You can't post success on social media, right? What you can post is swank, no bank, and don't fall for that, right? Because the real stuff you've just summarized in those 3 or 4 minutes, Phil.
And then Tom, I'd say kind of final thing to close that out is you've got to like start with the end in mind. So what are the goals and the objectives that you want to achieve? So if we said we want to write $1 million in fees, I'd say you've got to have brutal honesty. Is that, does your behavior match the outcome of what you're trying to achieve? And then if it's not, you've only got one of two choices: either change the goals or change the behavior. But there's no point saying we want this outcome if the behavior doesn't match. And so when I say you've got to make 20, 30 calls per day, you don't have to. It just depends on the size of the business that you want to have. So if you want to write 400 grand per year, that might equal 15 high quality calls per day, not the 20 or 30. So if the behavior aligns with the goals and you play the long game with skills, you're going to get there.
Oh, beautifully said. Team, this has been Tech Tuesday with Phil Harris from Harris, the managing director of one of the great businesses in Australia. If you are not a Realtair client, well, you can tell Harris is, and so are most of the big businesses in Australia. Now is as good a time to do it. So you're ready to be getting those proposals out there for January 1. Now's the time to do it. Phil Harris, I want to thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you again in person, and would love to have that lunch that we chatted about at some point next year. Thank you so much, Phil. And to everyone, thank you for joining in. Signing off.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Thanks, Tommy. Cheers, mate.